My memory is this is the 29th year.
I got one other story. You mentioned Claude. And I think a lot of people don't know Claude or Claude's background. You mentioned his being in Columbia at the Methodist Church. He was the associate to a man who was my bishop in 1960, J.O. Smith, who was a good man, and J.O. naively invited Claude to come to the Georgia Methodist Pastor School. And Claude came bringing in theology, a kind of neo-orthodox theology he had been reading, and it was not practical enough for the brethren. But some of us thought it was wonderful. And I thought he was a great lecturer in theology. And at that time, he was the chaplain. When he came back to us, he was chaplain at Southern Methodist. And he got into counseling through the counseling center there near Perkins. And who was the Texas person in Dallas, Joe? Ken Pepper. Was it Ken? Yeah. I think he got in through Ken. The other, I'm not going to talk all afternoon, but I don't think you know this. When AAPC decided that we needed an executive director, I remember Bob Myers and I think maybe Tom House. I'm not sure who the third member was, but we went through the applications, and the two people, there were the last two were Claude Evans and Jim Ewing. I don't know that anybody really knows that Claude was in on that. And we decided that Jim had been in AAPC, that Claude was a newcomer. I knew Claude, and I knew what a competent person he was. We decided to hire Jim. And for a number of years, I think there was some kind of sadness between me and Claude because of that. And when Jim kind of was not the greatest at the end of his term, I had a lot of feelings. Well, that's another mistake I made. You know? But I like to remember Claude, and he's in lots of ways. Thank you.
Lays her head down on my shoulder. Live and learn, and we're one day older. Teach me simple things. Help me understand. Take me by my hand and teach me simple things. Late at night, I sit here sighing, weak and worn, and there's no denying that deep inside a voice is crying. Who can save a world that's dying? Teach me simple things. Help me understand. Take me by my hand and teach me simple things.
It seems to me another thing that's been important to the region in its early development was these large systems that really populated the area with pastoral counselors. GAPC, Georgia Baptist, and Jerry needs to chime in here about his involvement with membership. But Birmingham Baptist, Winston-Salem, and the Baptist system, those systems made huge contributions to the development of pastoral counselors, it seems to me, in an era that put people all over the region.
I've been thinking about my experience, and as I go back in my memory, I have almost a condensation of ACPE and AAPC, and I have to keep working on differentiating the historical development of the two, because in my experience, they were so merged, well, later on, but primarily it was a dedicated position to ACPE. The Wayno's position, as you all have already documented it here, was it is for the training of ministers to perform ministry in the church or in the institution. And even envisioning it outside of that was not in the profile at all that Wayne had. And I gathered Stuart was there also. And that was the position. It was to be that way. But as I think about my experience then, the movement of ACPE from a very Baptist organization in the beginning, if some of you remember, it was the Association for Clinical Pastoral Educators. And when we went to the organizational meeting, we merged into a larger group. And I remember once meeting in Boston, and AAPC was having a meeting at the same time. But it was like the two groups flirted with the idea we ought to have one national meeting. And didn't we have a national meeting together at one point?
And there's one coming up in February, huh?
Yeah, but that was way back in the late 60s, that would have been. But for my own experience, as I think about being here, is my clinical experience, to take the generic, has been from a very provincial, sectarian perspective to a more inclusive perspective. And that has been much more, had much more vitality to it, or where we are now. But I think back how sectarian and provincial I was in the 60s and 70s.
Were able to come to this meeting at no cost, no registration fee. And for us, that's just old hat. Spouses just come with you, and that's what you do. In the Georgia Association of Marriage and Family Therapists, I fought for years to get them to allow the women to sit in on the sessions. They're not professionals. You know, what might they hear? Or about, you know, all this crazy stuff. So I've always felt that we really took the lead in that area, and I think it has to do with our being pastors, and the pastor's wife has always been very involved with what the minister had done. But I've always felt good about that.
Finally, riding a motorcycle is pure T fun. Whatever pure T means, I don't know. It came from my childhood. You drive a motorcycle with your whole body, and your life depends on your skill. Seeing the obvious pleasure in my son's eyes did me in. This no son of mine will ever have a motorcycle human being had to have his own motorcycle too. And that's where I learned about expanded freedom, about challenging danger, about the sexual side of motorcycling, and experienced the intense delight that comes from mastering a motorcycle. As happens over time to most motorcycle riders, my thrumming has become quiet. So I sold my Honda to a 35-year-old teenager. But all the memories that I have, if I was asked for a prayer to end this devotional, here is one. Quote, "Please, God, Don't let the religious right take away all our fun experiences in life.
Nature, she's a constant giver. Learn her ways and she'll...
It's that difference between who we are as pastoral counselors as opposed to secular therapists and licensure and just so many of those issues as we go forward. We're losing some of the sacredness of it, for me anyway.
Well, you're at the main issue, it seems to me. I mean, why do you want to be a pastoral counselor? You can get some religious training with or without ordination. You can get licensed based on a secular degree program. How is this important? And I've had people ask me that when I was directing the degree program. And what I used to say, and I don't know if it's still relevant, you get in a pastoral counseling program when you have some commitment, call it religious or not, to think theologically about what's going on with human beings and to think in terms of relationship to God as well as relationship among people. Now that's, I don't know how to go beyond that, because the payoff isn't there if the money payoff is in being licensed. So I wish I knew the answer to that.
Well, I've had an experience that maybe for me is a paradigm that is useful. When I was take the experience of analysis, and I was talking one day, lying on the couch, and William Rodersman, sitting behind me, listened to certain things, and I had a slight cough or something, and he said to me, "I think you ought to see a doctor." And I said, "Well, what made you think that?" He said, "Well, I was just listening to you. Remember, my primary mode of thinking is as a physician, as a doctor. And it shapes how I listen to you. So I think, John, for me, my primary mode of thinking is theological and pastoral. And it is my default position, as it were, because I'm always listening with that perspective. Now, without a theological education or without pastoral experience, I don't think I would have.
Nature, she's a constant giver. Learn her ways and she'll deliver. So let's go fishing in the river, 'cause every day it's now or never. Teach me simple things, help me understand, take me by my hand and teach me simple things. Take me by my hand and teach me simple things.